Hello, Magic is Real listeners, followers, family. Thank you so much for being here today. I am Shannon. I am a psychic medium. This is the podcast where I interview near death experiencers, healers, and many different people on their about their spiritual journeys and where they share their insights. And we talk about all things metaphysical and spiritual. I must say in advance, if you do enjoy this podcast, would you do me a favor? And if you're on YouTube, please take the time to leave a comment. It really helps the show to grow. And so I can keep doing this because I do this part time, but a lot of my time. So I'd love to keep doing it. It's my passion. Thank you so much for bearing with that little intro. Without further ado, I would like to introduce to you the wonderful Barbara With. I will tell you a little bit about her, and then I'm going to have her tell you a lot about her. I'm just going to give you a brief synopsis. She's a spiritual psychic reader. She's been a spiritual psychic reader since 1987. Barbara has been conducting and documenting thousands of channeling sessions around the world, speaking the voices of Albert Einstein and other angelic peacemakers from beyond the grave, as we say. Together with the psychic sorority, Barbara and the party, along with the angels, have created conflict revolution as a solution for world peace. One person at a time, each of us starting with ourself. Barbara, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to be here today.
Oh, Shannon, thanks so much for having me. I just love having these conversations, and it's an exciting time.
I can't wait to talk with you about that. Thank you. First of all, I would love to start by just tell us what you do. I know that's a lot, a big question, but however you'd like to put it, I'd like you to share in your own words what it is that you're all about.
Well, in a short sentence, I've published 6 or 7 books, nonfiction books of my research and development, channeling Einstein and the party and the angels. And from that work has come a process called conflict revolution. And I think the story of how all that came about is just as important, actually, as the work itself. So I think if I could just share a little bit of
Please,
that,
I'd love that.
because I was listening to your last episode and you were talking about growing up, the scar,
Yeah.
and not ever thinking that you could get to where you are as a voiceover actress. And kudos for you. Something I've always wanted to do is voiceovers
Thank you. Yeah.
and acting. But anyway, so when I was little, I started with music and I started playing piano when I was 5. I started writing songs when I was 12. And all I ever wanted to be was a rock star. And I knew that I was probably the other way. I probably thought way too much of myself, although I do write some pretty amazing music.
I bet you
But
do.
as a kid, and then I was playing at parties, and by the time I got out of high school, I was just went on the road as a singer songwriter. This is in the 70s, so and but that process I always explain is the same process, the process of writing music, going into the nothing, pulling out the words and the melody and the chord structure and the rhythm and putting it into an expressible concept is what channeling is. So I had that innate understanding of channeling without thinking of it as a psychic ability or channeling. But in high school, I was introduced to a woman who gave readings, group readings. And she never said she was channeling anybody. She just said she was the big antenna. And she had Jesus and a candle, and she'd go out of her body and talk beautiful, beautiful information, mostly about, in retrospect, self love, how to self love myself. There were predictions and there were psychological sessions about my relationship to my mother, and it was whatever. But that's how I was introduced to what has become the way that I channel. And so when I started spontaneously automatic writing in 1987, I knew what it was. I was very well versed in these arts, but I was still shocked that it was coming from me, but it felt kind of like writing music to me. And when I asked, "Who are you?" they said, "Sound." So I could live with that. And that's how I began to be a channel. And I explained that I was just an antenna and began to get referrals. Everything was referral. And in 1993, I wanted to do some groups and see what this voices of we, because it was always we, and what they would say to a group of people. And I couldn't get my regular clients. And one day, Teresa showed up at my door. She was a referral, and she sent 5 or 6 other women. And then she sent her best friend, Kim. And at the same time, I was thinking, oh, here's my group. They were thinking, oh, maybe Barbara will come and channel for us as a group. And that was the beginning of what eventually became Conflict Revolution.
Yes, talk about conflict revolution.
Well, the gist of this work with the psychic sorority was that when they asked, "Who are you?" it wasn't sound, it wasn't an antenna, it was angels. And I was a little skeptical. What does that mean? But the angels said they had this revolutionary process that they thought would be the answer for people to first resolve conflict within them in the specific way they were talking about. And the byproduct would be world peace. And they needed human beings to test it. And so this was the three of us. And true enough, eventually we had our first fight. And I was sitting at the table going, you need to. And she was saying, you. And I went and got the transcript. If you're involved in a conflict, the root of your part of it is within you. And in that moment, all three of us were there, but we all just had like a shift and started crying. And I came back to the table going, wow, here's what I need to do. And Kim did the same thing. And so that was the very first step of learning how to translate this broad idea they were giving us into a practical step-by-step instructions. And the part about it is that evening after this fight and we had this revelation, I went to work. I was singing at a hotel, and there was a waitress there who never had anything to do with me. She just never said hello. She was cold as ice, and I didn't care. Just what happens sometimes. And I went in that night. She could not get enough of me. She was so warm and offering me drinks and putting money in my tip jar and asked me what music I liked. And I thought, this is what they're talking about, those angels. That when we change it here in a certain way, as within, so without, the natural projection of what we're now find unification within us, where before I was you with Kim, I was you with her probably. It changes in a way you cannot change it going directly into the arena that the conflict is being played out. So I couldn't have gone into that restaurant and sat her down and said, hey, what's wrong? Don't you like me? To have it turn out to where she was so drawn to this new energy. So that was really the beginning of us working what was channeling, putting it to real life process. And to this day, we all still do this work. The three of us are supernaturally connected to this day. So
That's beautiful. We definitely need more of that on this earth. And we'll get into that because you said it's an exciting time, and I agree. It's also, like many, many times in history, a time of conflict, a time of strife, a time of fighting, a time of political parties divided and people divided. But within that, I know that there's the possibility for hope and growth and evolution, which I'd like to talk about more. But before I get there, I want to stay on track self. So I'd love to know too how you discovered that you were channeling Einstein. How did that come to be?
well, after the girls and I published our first book, Diaries of a Psychic Sorority, Talking with the Angels, and it's the true story, it's our very diaries that we kept, I got an invitation from a tabloid in London to do a paranormal channel from beyond the grave of Princess Diana on the 1 year anniversary of her death in 1998. And again, very skeptical, but I'd never done anything like this. Now they went from angels now to actually dead people. I mean, people who had been alive who were now passed on.
Yeah.
And I did the interview. It was phenomenal. And the bottom line of the interview was about peace. That Princess Diana in afterlife, like she did in life, worked for peace. And she said, if everybody who put flowers on the palace gate that day that I died would do this work, we could have world peace. And the tabloid didn't want it, but I went on to decide that maybe there's other famous dead people, and my agent and I made a list, and I would imagine going to them and asking them, and some of them would say no, and then up came Nicole Brown Simpson. And so we did this, my agent and I, till we got to John Kennedy, which was, each and every interview was mind blowing to me. And then he said to us, you don't have to do that anymore, because we'll show you. We're a group of 12 who have been working on this project of trying to inspire the world into peace. And of course, John Kennedy, that's why he got killed, because he wanted to be a peacemaker. So that's when I got introduced to Albert Einstein. Next up is Albert Einstein, and he wasn't even on our list. I was like, I mean, who doesn't love him? But
Yeah.
I'm not into science or math. And when I channeled him, I was speaking. It was the voice of all my channeling.
Wow.
And it was shocking. And it took me several years to accept it, that I wasn't just trying to aggrandize my art or making it up. But in 2005, I thought, let's just do a book for Einstein. It's a 100-year anniversary of E equals MC squared. Let's just see what he has to say. And in those sessions that I did in the subsequent editing, he basically delivered his unified field theory, which he couldn't do in life. And they included a map. They include a map of human consciousness, as we call it, about how human consciousness interacts with the unified field to create the physical world, and a scientific quantifiable definition of compassion, with a capital C we use, as the fifth fundamental force of the universe, the creative intelligence that uses the other four fundamental forces to impel the creation of the physical world one step at a time.
And you told me that you're not a math person or a science person, and so that's a even more compelling, and I'm not either. I'm definitely even quantum physics, which isn't the same as physics. I'm interested in it, but it goes it's too complicated for my brain. So yeah, what was how I guess the question is for people that don't channel. And if you can explain what channeling is as opposed to like I'm a medium, right? So I can call it channeling, but I'm receiving messages, but I'm not doing sort of myself a flow of like a speech or a stream of consciousness kind of thing. What does it feel like if you can describe it so that you know it's not your own thoughts or voice and you're surrendering to the voice of the spirit world? How do you know when you're in?
I began having to be out, so to
Yeah, you
speak,
have to
and
leave. Yeah.
discover it. But I mean, when I started to, the first time I was at a party and I said, okay, look, I grew up going to this woman who did this. I want to try to speak and channel.
Yeah.
I have no idea what I'm doing. And I closed my eyes and just took a breath, and it felt like there was a wind coming up from my feet up through me, and that I was on this kind of the outside of it, like watching it. And then I began to talk, and it was in my body. Honestly, it felt like me, but what was being said was not something that was originating in my intention. So, for example, when I first spontaneously automatic wrote, I was writing a letter to my friend, and I was really being kind of not a good person, pointing my finger at her, telling her how bad it is that she makes judgments. I mean, the irony was completely lost on me. And when this energy took over my hands, it was because I started typing, yes, because when you make judgments, like the lens of a camera of your eye, it closes way down and you only see a little tiny bit of the whole entire picture. So open up. And I knew very clearly that wasn't me. And I think that when it started to happen, because it was like singing, it was like channeling something through me, but clearly I wasn't going to say those things. And I had never had that thought before. Like, what? What does that even mean? Okay, let me think about it. So now when I do it, when I channel, it very much feels seamlessly like me. When you hear my channeling today in 2024, it's much, much, much different than it was back then in the 90s when I was first starting to channel. There was a very heavy, kind of a thick Yiddish accent we figured out later. And it was laborious, but I've been put through paces. I've allowed a lot of different entities. I think that's why they call it a party, because it's a lot of different souls who want in on this, helping the world make peace. And I think in the end, I go back to what the psychic sorority and I said when we were talking about, what do you mean this is angels? Because I afterwards I like, why are you guys looking for an identity? What do you mean they're angels? So we had a very rigorous discussion, and we decided that we had to judge it by its fruits. We had to judge the information coming through, because it wasn't about whatever the entity was, like worshiping that entity, or it was the information. And the information was so high level, and it was changing our lives so profoundly and in such miraculous, exciting ways that we didn't care if it was the Easter Bunny. And so that's how we came about. And now today, when you hear me speak, my sister sometimes says, it's very hard to tell if you're channeling or not. And I think because I myself am so dedicated to this work, to making decisions for the good of the whole, it's kind of a basic process we teach people in conflict revolution in relationship to their own map of their own consciousness, not like having to, decide what's good for everybody outside you. But I'm so dedicated to it because it is manifestation. It is what is the basis of this synchronicity, because I was listening to your show about when we're in that zone and when we are manifesting, it's because there's kind of a surrender, but still this knowledge that we're tapped into some bigger power. But that's how it feels to me. Like I'm just really gifted to have this voice and this talent and this gift.
Yeah, I know. I feel the same way about the mediumship gift. It's like it's changed my life and made every day magic, which is why the show is called Magic is Real. When you realize that a lot of the thoughts in your head are not coming from you. And like you said, it's a matter of not being intentionally thinking to find the answers. It's about being and receiving and trusting. And it can feel weird because we're so used to being logical. "Well, what does that mean?" And so you have to just kind of go, stop judging it. Like you said, no judgment, just trust, let it flow. Let whatever comes come and trust that spirit is not going to steer you wrong in their, um, I don't want to say advice, but whatever insight that they have to share. So when people come to you, what are some of the reasons that people would come to you to participate in the conflict revolution program? And what does it sort of entail? And do you have any particular anecdotes about how it has helped people evolve, help them in their lives?
Oh, absolutely. People who come to me are usually, I call them the participation of the willing. People who want a psychic to tell them all the answers are gravely sometimes disappointed in
Oh
me,
yeah.
because it's all about empowering you to be your own authority, to trust your own intuition, to understand your own self so much that you make intentional choices to change your life. And so those willing people come, and they usually come like Kim, for example. Kim was very conservative businesswoman, and this is the 90s. Okay, so very conservative businesswoman, pearls, matching bag, never dangly earrings, helped her father build World Aerospace. Would never have gone to a psychic until she was in crisis, an esoteric crisis that was pushing her out of her comfort zone into an area that she had no idea how to deal with. And it's what the channeling does is, and she'll tell you this from her first reading, she went home on fire. she transcribed her tape and she was like, what's this? What's this? What's this? But it gives you this perspective of not that you need healing, but that you're completely whole. And here's just switch your perspective just this much this way, and you're going to see a whole different world. So it doesn't change what you think you know, or it doesn't give you, I think it gives you information that you've never heard before, but mostly it just reflects back to you a much more divine picture of who you are, so that your human mind, your intellect, which is, like you were saying in your podcast, laboriously trying to tell you that you're not good enough, and emotion, which we like to situate in our solar plexus, is coming up and wedding itself to these thoughts of you're not good enough, and then projecting them into the world. And that's what you have. You create
Yeah.
a world around you where you're not good enough.
Right.
So it's people who really want to know that shift and how to do it themselves, and then how to be their own authority figure. And I have to say, there's certainly way more people than when I started all those many years ago. But I think generally in society, people would much rather point their finger outside and, that leader needs to go, and that person is doing it to me, and that over there. And it goes too with what you were saying about why I'm so hopeful. Because yes, when you look outside yourself, there's a lot of chaos. You look outside yourself, there's a lot of conflict going on, particularly in the political arena. And but also World War III at our door, and Gaza is horrifying, and Ukraine is horrifying. There's a lot of horrifying things. My hope is that over 30 some years of doing this work and seeing now in 2024, more than ever, people are banging open. They're just coming alive. They want to know what they can do. They want to be the willing, way more than in the 90s when everybody had a nice,
Yeah.
income, and there wasn't much war that we had to deal with, and everybody wants to. And I've seen the miracles. You asked about so many stories of conflict revolution that I could tell, the miraculous stories. And in fact, when you come to a workshop or you do the work, you bring a conflict and we name it, so that we can, in these times, go, oh, here, let me tell you about the drunken marketing manager conflict. Okay, so this was mine. Very basically, I worked at a nonprofit, and a woman who was not my manager, she was the marketing manager, I was the executive assistant, would come and bring me work to do. And I would do that work to the
Sure.
best of my ability, and then she would criticize me for how I did it. And she was always drunk.
Sorry,
And
it's not funny, but
no, I
but
know,
it kind
but
of is.
it's like, what?
How,
So
yeah.
I I every day home from work and back, I would do my conflict revolution. Like, okay, I created my sound bite. Like, what is she doing? Well, she's giving me work to do, and then she's criticizing me for it. Okay, so now I'm going to rub all my focus to me. Now, where do I do this in my life? Sometimes it's the direct mirror. Sometimes it's something over here that you just never dealt with. It took me 2 weeks. I don't do that. I don't give my work to people and then criticize. I do, if anything, I do everybody else's work. So I called Teresa, and without hesitation, she said, oh, I know. It's like, oh, how clearly we can see other people, right? I had separated from my husband for a while at that time. And she said, remember when you left Gary? Remember how he paid the mortgage and paid all the utilities and did all the yard work and took care of the dog and changed the storm windows and kept the house alive? And all you could say was how he didn't support you. And in one moment, the breath got knocked out of me, and I knew that was the root. You're just like, oh my God, I never thought of it that way. I was so off in my head going, well, he didn't do this, when he could have done that. And so that gave me an opportunity in that moment to go to my husband and say, hey, look, I need to make some amends. That was not right of me to do that. And our relationship, and even though he's my ex-husband now, we're still very, very close.
Oh, good.
But I went back to work, and she had gotten fired. So what we say about conflict resolution is when you get that aha moment, we call it hanging and dang, when you catch yourself being that person that you need to
Yeah.
change. something happens where the manifestation, either the person will rise to the occasion or they'll disappear. If you're in conflict with somebody, either you change and they are inspired and change with you, or they go look for somebody else to maybe have a, you know, conflicted relationship with, but you get to be clear.
Yeah. So it's keeping your side of the street clean energetically. And as I'm a 12-step person, so going back and making amends is such a huge part of it. It's saying, hey, you might have hurt me, but I had a role in that most of the time. Most of the time, obviously, unless you're violently assaulted or something. But and that's part of it. And one of and I've talked about this extensively on this podcast and my other one called Still Standing, where I interview people who have had challenges and recovered from addiction and that sort of thing. That, in my addiction, I was involved in a very toxic relationship. And he was, I think, a narcissist, which I now realize, covert narcissist. But when we made amends to each other, he made amends for his side. And then I was like, look, I mean, I could sit here and say, oh, he was cheating on me or being with or whatever, or lying. He wasn't lying, but whatever. It was like I could think of a million things he did that were so egregiously out of line and inappropriate. But who stood for it for 10 years on and off? Who showed up for that? Who received that? Who believed that she wasn't good enough to receive more? Who thought she had to fight for somebody who's so unhealthy? And so there is always, apart from violent assault or those kinds of things, there's always a part that we play in it, which is, what am I getting out of this? If someone's sucking me dry, is that real? I could also choose to walk away from that situation and say, no longer. I'm not going to be the person that you take energy from. So I love that concept so much. And I know we won't, I know we won't get into specifically world events. It's so triggering for people, but what do you see happening? And you did touch on it about, because of all of this strife, we're being given an opportunity to step up for those that want to be peacemakers and that want to help. What do you sort of anticipate happening in the larger scale? Is this something that will just keep coming up generation after generation after generation? I've heard a lot of NDE people say, eventually we feel like we will reach peace. It seems so insurmountable. It seems like, really, that's how. But what do you see just generally about the way we resolve what's happening now? Do we resolve it? Is it just an endless cycle of lessons? What do you think from what you've learned from the angels, from Einstein, and whoever else you're channeling?
I have found that conflict resolution and the concepts of it, even if you don't do specifically conflict revolution, register,
Yeah.
people who are going into themselves, doing their own work, doing their shadow work, are the leaders. And I think because conflict revolution teaches us to get our focus off of the external world, first and foremost, whatever triggers us there is our key to what we're going to revolve back around and look at in our own system. And going back to addiction, I was terribly abused as a child and became, by the time I got into treatment, I had 5 addictions. And of course, it was all about being victimized and victimizing myself. And I also was sexually assaulted, quite surprisingly to me, by a friend. And even in that, I could do my revolution, where I could say, what part of my intuition, which was probably telling me to keep yourself safe, what part of my intellect would override that and say, oh no, but this guy, the world is a better place because I, and this wonderful person, am sitting next to him, shielding the world from, so I had layers of that kind of facade that I had to bring down with that. So it is not only possible, it's what we have to do, this 100% responsibility for creating our world. And when Einstein has showed us the unified field, not only is it to advance scientific ideas that aren't my department, but it proves why conflict revolution works. It proves why When each individual does this inner work that's reflecting the war or the whatever out there, turn it back in, you can always find the place where there's a conflict that's going on within you. And I can tell you this, there's one root, Einstein says, and I've been testing this for years, and I'm 100, not 100%, but 99% sure. The root of all conflict, whether it's your relationship to your boyfriend or your mother or the war or anything outside yourself, comes from the disconnection in the system, the three human dimensions we have, the map that we work with: emotion, intuition, and intellect. And in a perfect system, all emotion is flowing up and it's into the heart and it's informing intuition, which is the voice of compassion, leading us to the next most advantageous step for the whole system at that moment. Not what's going to happen next week, not should I go to college or not, but what's happening right now. It's impelling us to take that step. And then it gets into the intellect, which has actually been given the power to control the physical actions. So if intuition says turn left, it's not the intuition that ignites the hand to grab the wheel and turn to the left. It's the intellect. It comes from the intellect. So the intellect has been given the power to say no to intuition. So, and we all have done it, right? Intuition tells you rest. Intellect says, oh, heck, I can't rest. I've got a million things to do. And it makes the decision and off it goes. And then pretty soon you're sick or you're having fights with your family or whatever. So if you really boil it down to this root level, this between the intellect and the intuition is where all conflicts manifest from. And think about it in terms of any world leader. Now, because these aren't groups that operate, these are individuals who make decisions. And if intuition is telling us, here's what to do for the good of the whole, and intellect is saying, nope, we're not going to do that. We're going to do this because it's going to benefit me, like the ego. That is the root of all conflict. And why I'm hopeful is because A, we've been put here at this time to bring it. And we have this incredible capacity because of our dedication to our work and, of course, the power that we have within us and the support that we have from other spiritual people to be as powerful of a person as we can while we're here on the planet. And now we have all kinds of ways. You don't have to do conflict resolution. I just think I've never found anything that gets me any deeper and more instant into my present moment. What am I supposed to be doing with myself process than this? But still, quieting the fluctuations of the thinking through meditation, feeling and breathing emotion, any kind of study. But nothing really can capture the power of you catching yourself, making the decision that's creating your conflict in the first place. And that is simultaneously terrifying because people don't want to be that responsible, and liberating because I don't have to take care of other people. I just have to take care of myself and make sure I'm working for the good of the whole, and that will project into the world, and it surely does. So we have so much power. We have so much power.
Thank you. That was so beautifully said. And in that sense, you know, as you said, you saw I was doing a manifestation challenge because it was kind of a slow season, and I was like, let's do a little bonus thing here. Um, from that perspective, in a way, you are saying that through our own energy, we can manifest what's happening or how we perceive what's happening around us. I may not, you can reword that for me. But what is sort of the role of how much power do we have to manifest not only our reality, but like if I want to manifest peace, I mean, obviously I'm one person here, right? And so in our human bodies, that seems, what do you mean? I can change I can't, the feeling that we have this limited thinking is how can I change what's happening over here? How can I make people stop hurting each other? But what would you say about just anything that you feel resonates with you about the topic of manifestation? How much power do we have? And if so, how do we do it?
You know, I just did a meditation the other day, and I'm going to channel Tesla pretty soon about free energy.
Oh, cool.
And so they were talking in the channel about, we're going to create this free energy and it's there. And the question, well, how are we going to do that? Because I didn't hear anything in the channel that told us how to do it. We are the free energy. We do manifest the entire universe that we're experiencing. And when you see the maps, the very quickly, without, it's kind of mind-boggling without one in front of it, but the center, the source of everything is in the center of the planet. And it's a black hole. And trust me, when he told me that in 2005, I wanted to run and hide and say, I have to tell the world the source of everything is in the center of the planet. It's a black hole. Well, science has caught up to that. And there's a gravitational wave that's coming from what we call your compilation. You have one particle that surrounds all of that math that's going to be the chair and your body and everything that you experience, that we're experiencing is separate. And from that compilation, a gravitational wave emerges and it actually flows through the very earth till it gets to the surface and it bursts through. And I just learned the other day, the interface between the non-physical and the physical is the hippocampus. It's this part of the brain right at the base of the brain that is, it's like the left and right brain. And it comes bursting through. This is the power of compassion that we are, creating your physical body that's then projecting the whole universe and then perceiving it back and having this human experience. But the gravitational wave continues on until it up into the heavens, until it reaches the edges of the Earth's electromagnetic field. And it gets caught up again. It goes back down in the North Pole and it begins again. So it's this spinning string. And the lens sort of acts like a prism where everything separates out and the body is there. So when you say, do we really have the power to manifest? We really do. Everything, the whole world that we're experiencing is beginning within us in this way. Now, intentional manifestation, I have learned through many, many years of trial and error, and is that what you think you want to manifest is not always what on a bigger level that you're meant to manifest, especially if you're working for the good of the whole. So unlike you who grew up not thinking you were good enough to be, I put every single ounce of my passion, my focus, I gave up everything in my life, relationships, stable home lives, going to school to go be a rock star. And it didn't happen. I did 20 years, I won awards, I traveled all over, but I didn't become that thing that I was intending to get. However, when you're working for the good of the whole and you're willing to be a channel for compassion, you create things that are much greater than you can physically think about. So what I've learned after all these years for me is that now that I am in a place where I don't always get what I want, but I always want what I get.
Yeah.
I always embrace it as this is the perfect thing I am creating. And now what am I going to learn from? Where am I going to get that nugget? And every time I can revolve a conflict and get in and let out some of this trapped emotion that's been abscessed there since my childhood and maybe lifetimes, breathing it, releasing it. Now that I can tame those wild horses, I can live every day loving what I get, even if it's horrible. It's a really strange paradox, but it's like I can just be in a horrible place and still just be so grateful that I get to have this life. And that's when we start to then, what do you want? Intentionally, what do you want to manifest? Because now you're naturally making those answers of what you want for the good of the whole. I don't want to be a rock star anymore. I'm so glad I wasn't. What a crazy life. I would have died, I'm quite sure, of
Yeah.
drugs or something. And now with all the way it is now, it's like, no, but I get to be this voice of Einstein, something I couldn't even see.
Right.
So we trust that compassion to guide us to create our fullest, deepest, richest expression of ourselves. And more people are seeing that, I think. I'm just so excited.
Yeah. And do you think there's a reason why certain spirits come to certain people? Can we all channel Einstein, for example? Or is it like a resonance thing? Like for some reason, your soul and Einstein's soul resonate with each other and therefore you're able to channel him? Or is it something that anyone can sort of summon from the other side and say, whoever it is, uh, Judy Garland, I loved you in The Wizard of Oz. Can we have a conversation? Can we actually do that? What's the potential for that?
I think so.
Yeah.
Um, and partly because in these three human dimensions that are, it's like spiritual organs, right? Everybody's got a heart, everybody's got a stomach, everybody's got a liver, everybody has intuition, everybody has intellect, everybody has emotion, everybody has intuition. So, why some people are born to be great soccer players and other people are born to be great singers, that's the mystery of life.
Yes.
But as far as, can you train yourself to speak to Einstein? Of course.
Yeah.
Or Judy Garland or anybody, especially because that era that we're talking about, these are the people who were in their lives worked for peace in real life. Einstein, Marilyn Monroe, she's in the Party of 12. She was a peace activist. Nobody really knew that about her. Freud, all these people were, and we can do that too.
That's really cool. Yeah. I've heard a lot of people say that they channel Robin Williams a lot. Like apparently he's really hot on the scene because
That
like
would
there's just
make
a lot of people
sense.
talking to him. I know. I mean, I don't
He's
know,
so
but
extroverted, right?
he's
He,
right.
he, he needs people.
It does. And what is it that you found that, for example, Einstein, starting with Einstein, them going to the collective, want us to know? Why are they, why do they want to share this information? What is it that's the overarching message that they want us to have?
For me and my relationship to Einstein, which I think is we figured out before I was born. I think it was a destiny of mine. I don't think I just manufactured it. But he in real life was a huge, huge peace activist. He also was very, very much against science creating weapons like the mustard gas that his friends were developing at that time, and then of course later on with the Manhattan Project, he refused to be a part of it, and he died really attached to the idea of how do we stop war, which was his question in real life. He
Hmm.
pursued, and that he didn't understand quantum, that he couldn't let himself go to quantum in real life. So when he got into afterlife, when you die, what you're attached to, you take with you, sort of like an imprint of a, photograph negative on you, and then it has to play out. I think why we reincarnate with people a lot, because when we die, we love this person, then we come back, and but he and I believe a lot of these other souls who are with us as time has marched on since 1955 when he died, came into afterlife with this burning need from life. And so who else but Einstein could go into afterlife, figure it all out, figure out a way to articulate it as he, rounded up a bunch of other beautiful souls who wanted in on the mission, convey that information to three women to inspire them to fight so
Yeah.
they could test the theory and then have it work. And 30 years later of doing this work all over the world and with so many people, and last April I was at the Science of Consciousness conference put on by University of Arizona Tucson, 30 years of scientists seeking the nature of consciousness. And I came in with my little theory, I talk to dead people, I'm not a scientist, and came away like, oh no, we are so onto it. We are so onto it. And like I imagined in my head that we were so onto it before I talked to the scientists, but then would think, Barbara, how can you say that? You're just a psychic and they're scientists. And it's like, no, I am convinced more than ever that this is Einstein, that we're onto it, and that very soon we're going to be able to take this sort of worldwide, like Diana was saying in that first interview. Like if everybody who put flowers in the palace would do this, and I was like, wow, put it in a tabloid, get it to 40 million people. She's like, it's brilliant, but we're not in charge. But that is the idea. So that's where we're going, Einstein and the party and me. And I just wanted to share a small manifestation, kind of a big manifestation. I left last October for my World Peace Tour. I covered 23,000 miles in 7 continents and 16 states. And I did a reading in Bucharest for me and my associates, and they said, Barbara, when you're through circling the United States, stuff is going to start to break open for you. So as soon as I got home, I had a chance to be on Tucker Carlson asking a spiritual question.
Wow, that's interesting.
And that was also a vision that I had because I never was a Tucker fan, but in the past few years, I've really appreciated his very anti-war position.
Yeah.
Listening to him and was like, ask Tucker anything. And so I got to ask him, do you believe in afterlife? And
Oh, cool.
if you do you think we can talk to dead people? And it was a fascinating, but more than that, I was freaking out because I had been doing my intention of the vision of the manifestation. Somehow I'm going to be on Tucker. Somehow I'm going to be on Jimmy Dore. Somehow I'm going to be on Russell Brand. You know, it's being very specific. And so here came Tucker. And so afterwards I was shaking like I made it happen. And then Jimmy Dore did the same thing. Ask Jimmy Dore a question. So right away I wrote in about Jung. I know you're a Jung fan, but what do you do to catch yourself in your shadow side? I got picked. I got to
Wow.
spend a half hour with Jimmy Dore. And then just 2 days ago, Russell Brand put out the call for Ask Russell a question.
No
So
way. Oh, that's so
I
cool.
yeah, I had the trifecta. But anyway, the point being is that my intention is to get this information out to as many people as possible. If it's one person at a time, like our conversations, and it's just you and me, I'm going to have 2,000 of those conversations. And that's my message to people is do not underestimate the work that you do. Because when you see the model, you are the earth. Our wave is a part of the earth. And if we bring peace to our part of the wave, that's all we can do, but it's so powerful. And it attracts, it's that synergy, right, of other people who are making peace and other people who are having compassion and changing their lives. And we're all in the actual inside of the earth making such a difference. And I see it. I see very positive things manifesting right now in the midst of all the chaos that is making me go, yes, we're doing it.
Oh, good. Thank you. I think we all need to hear a little bit of hopeful optimism at a time, at a time like this, probably always. There are always horrible things happening. There are also a million beautiful things happening. And like you said, don't ignore you didn't say this part, but don't ignore the negative, but stay in the love, stay in the presence and the good intention and keeping your side of the street clean. And one by one, we each do make a difference because each one of us, we just put love out there and move away from the dark. I think we do have the power to make a big difference, not just in groups, but just energetically. We can change things. So I love hearing that. So just tell us what you have coming up, anything you'd like to share. We're going to have your website listed below, but anything, how can we reach you or anything else you'd like to share about your work and how people can work with you?
Well, Barbara with BARBARAWITH.com. That's my personal website. And over there, you can also see I'm an investigative journalist, and I'm doing a whole series about propaganda and how do we unindoctrinate, because we're indoctrinated, excuse me. But you could book a reading over there. And synergyalliance.llc, that's the whole story of everything, conflict revolution and the psychic sorority and how we all came together. Right now, I'm doing a summer Wednesday morning meditation with, we're calling it the remagnetization meditations. And every week we do another deep dive into a meditation that includes the maps So that we call this the new operating system, so that we get out of our heads and into our visioning in our body and our meditation about the bigger being that we are. And every week we take a different part. Like last week's was emotion, and they took us through this beautiful guided meditation of moving through the whole system. And so I'm doing that. And all my work on YouTube, my website, I don't monetize. And I realized the other day, you know what? I know I don't monetize. I don't do a lot of marketing. I don't do the chase for likes. I don't do any of that. And so consequently, I learned the other day that when you don't monetize, the Google and YouTube, they won't push you out there because they don't make any money off you.
Right.
And I realized, oh, that's why I've just been kind of consistently drawing people who are willing, who are
Hmm.
kind of meant to come and really want to do this work. And I'm good with that. But consequently, there's a lot of information on my between my website, Synergy Alliance, my YouTube channel. I have Instagram and X, but mostly and Facebook. And I would say that if you want to get an idea of the work that how I'm channeling conflict revolution into actual political conflicted discourse, come to my Facebook page, because my posting of my Tucker, even my Russell Brand and my Jimmy Dore has blown up my page. So people are either they get it because Tucker's he either you love him or you hate him.
Right.
And I used to really dislike him, and he had a really huge epiphany in his life and became vehemently anti-war or against everything. And I learned a lot about him, but it's just this interesting study in how do we handle, because there's so much name calling, there's so much propagandized minds that have been trained just to see a word and then just react to it, and then it's
Yeah.
a this and it's a Trumper and it's a libtard and it's a that's like. And somebody IM'd me today and said, "Oh my God, Barb, it's crazy what's going on in your page." I said, "I know, but this is my chance to be that person that I want to be. I want to stay in love. I want to stay in the truth." And it's really hard to speak the truth sometimes when people are coming at you, calling you names and whatever, making assumptions. And people have never met me, but I'm kind of it's tough, and it requires my greatest revolution. But the more that I do it and I see the results, it's so exciting. I had a woman who I know, very good woman. She's a happens to be a white woman who's working in the indigenous community like I do. And she was trying to tell me that Tucker was a racist. And here's the criteria for white supremacy. And I said, every single one of these points is how I've been treated by the indigenous community sometimes. So I don't mind, because when it happens, I just like think, gosh, they have problems, and it doesn't stop me from doing all the work and loving my indigenous communities and continuing to support. But, you know, and I thought she was going to go away pissed. And the next thing I see is her whole tribute to her anger and how she's been projecting her anger, and she's been using her anger, and it's been wrong. She's been making assumptions. And I thought, see, if I
Yeah.
can do this. So those are the tough battles that to
Yeah.
keep us in our love.
Absolutely. That's so true. Barbara, thank you so much for taking the time to share everything that you just did. I'm really excited to share this with my listeners. And I know that, like you said, if it resonates with even one person, you've done your job. So thank you for being of service in that way.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Thank you for doing these podcasts, because I know how much work it is, very much so. And I'm always lovely surprised to meet such beautiful people doing
Me
this
too.
work. So hopefully we'll be connected now. We're part of
Yes.
the network.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you again, Barbara Whiff.